Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We live in the most fantastic of times. They really are precious. And you get to experience it. They will be very difficult times, but they're also extraordinary. And the potential that they hold is like nothing humans have ever experienced. And so I'm going to create a discussion today where I take from a piece of classic literature. I then modernize the story with a little bit of creative inspiration. And I offer some very spiritual and practical advice that I can draw from the discussion. Okay, so that's our basic format: classic literature, modernization, spiritual advice. And the literature that I'm going to reference is all the way back 2,400 years ago from ancient Greece, and it's Plato's The Cave. And this is a depiction of wisdom as taught by Socrates. And if you're unfamiliar with The Cave, very simply, it depicts individuals that are shackled to the wall of a very dark cave, and there are beings, others, that stand behind them that are projecting images onto the wall that all that the prisoners can see is directly in front of them. And so you picture their shackles on their throat and on their legs, and these images are reinforcing a false reality. You could call it an illusion or a matrix. But these beings who are so comfortable, these prisoners who are so comfortable, who have only ever known the shackles, believe all of this to be real. Why would they think anything else? Until eventually one escapes, and on his way out, he sees the others responsible for creating this false illusion. And he continues past them and winds up exiting the cave, and for the first time his eyes hurt so badly because the brightness of the sun shining down on him. And he realizes what the sun actually looks like, as opposed to just a simple projection on the wall. It's there up in the sky. He can smell the flowers and hear the birds and even see other people going by. And in his amazing enthusiasm for the reality, his now awakened self decides to descend back down into the cave and share this realization with the prisoners. And Socrates asks, "What do you feel the prisoners would do with such knowing?" He says, would they embrace it and also desire to break free of the shackles? And he says, no. In all likelihood, the prisoners would call the man crazy and even try to kill him, for they're feeling threatened and their safety and security is now at risk. And so that's the story that we're going to draw from for the rest of the discussion. And I think it's brilliant because it depicts two qualities. One is we do live in a bit of an illusion. Many of you have woken up to it and realized that the institutions that we've come to cherish have been badly infiltrated. And many of our leaders are not operating in our greatest good any longer. And many of those that run our large corporations are on a frequency that is very hard for many of us to connect with. The other part of the story, being the cave itself, is that even if somebody were to bring this realization that you are in fact enslaved, your consciousness may not be capable of receiving this, and you may get quite defensive, or other people may get very defensive at the belief that something's not right, or that they are in fact being manipulated one day to the next. And that's because the cave, metaphorically, exists within. You have a cave that's outside and around you, and then you have a cave that has you shackled within your own mind. And the cave in the mind is not just, it is oftentimes energies of fear, which ran rampant over the last few years as we were being traumatized. And it is also the energy, certainly, of denial, which is people who may have taken something into their body who are now in a state of denial around what it is that they've actually put in that could be harming them. But there are endless abuse patterns that have manipulated your way of being for most of your life, dating back to your childhood, that you may not even be aware of. And there are traumas that not just run at the level of this incarnation, but traumas that have carried over from past lives, generational trauma, cultural trauma. The list goes on and on and on. And these traumas, these vibrations, which are a heaviness on your being, are manipulating and affecting your way of being all the time. Endless amounts of addiction emanate from these unknown or unseen traumas, as to from abuse patterns. And sometimes the abusee becomes the abusor, starts to harm others. Dysfunctional relationships are emanating from this very same place. We see it all the time, people that they do so much work and therapy, and they take on spiritual practices like yoga or meditation, and yet they still can't break out of their same patterns. They don't know why that is. They're doing the same thing, self-destructive or otherwise dysfunctional behavior that they have for years and years, and they're perplexed why they can't seem to get past it. And the answer is that the system has built the cave within. It resides within. And so that brings me to the spiritual piece of this discussion, and the reason why I feel that these are the most exceptional of times is that the cave is crumbling. The cave all around us is starting to break down. The power structure that has dominated humanity since the beginning of time is leaving. It doesn't happen overnight, but it has begun to happen, and it's happening faster and faster all the time. It's on an accelerated path, which is why more and more of the nonsense coming out of the words of our leaders and the people in our cherished institutions don't make sense. It's almost comical. It's also why they're getting more and more desperate with their measures, because they're aware that their cave is starting to crack, and they know that the only way to preserve their authority is to keep you locked in it. And they do that with a lot of different tactics, much as it moving through the media, and then a lot in ways that we can't quite comprehend yet. It's by getting you to take things in your body that lower your vibration, curtail your consciousness, and ultimately reinforce the cave that resides within. Keep in mind that the beings that have been managing the cave, you don't know who they are. They're mercenaries you may have familiarity with, but the layer that sits on top is not known. And this is done for a reason, because it has a self-destructive nature. And the cave that I speak of has broken down and been rebuilt and broken down and been rebuilt many, many times over. Each time the attempt is to rebuild it even stronger than it was before. The difference this time is that this is the last time the cave will break down. There will not be another rebuilding. And on top of it, this is the first time that the cave within is breaking down as well. Provided you set the right intentionality, make the right choices, and are properly aligned as the incarnation has planned. And those are a lot of things that need to go right. You are well positioned like never before to dissolve the abuse patterns, the multiple layers of trauma, and many, many, many of the low vibrational tendencies that have built up within your incarnation that have otherwise kept you stuck in the cave within. And that is the most amazing message of hope I could possibly offer anybody who is on this frequency and understands what I'm talking about. So these next few years are going to be particularly difficult as the cave weakens further and further. And keep in mind that the Emperor has no clothes. The power that they wield is only that which we enable, which we give them. And right now you have millions of people every month that are waking up to the dysfunction within the cave. And even though they haven't properly transcended the cave within, they're no longer willing to comply with the cave all around them. And that makes all the difference. And so as those who are responsible for managing the cave grow more and more desperate, they have been planning for a very long time more and more measures to keep you fearful, to keep you potentially in harm's way, and to get you to comply with their will so that you are forced to stay shackled to the wall of the cave. Do not allow this. The spiritual advice that I offer you is say no with great courage. Tap into that which doesn't feel right, recognize it for what it is, and say no. Again, the emperor has no clothes. Stop complying with that which is not right. The other thing that I will share with you is that when the cave crumbles, those that are locked in the cave, who are shackled to the wall of the cave, or who are too close, even if they have broken from some of the shackles but have yet to fully exit the cave, they are the most vulnerable to the events that are unfolding. And many of them will not make it. And so I say the time is now to break from these shackles and to exit that cave as quickly as possible. And the way that you do that is with a very simple, practical piece of advice. Everybody will have to apply this based on where they live and the circumstances of their life. Find a way to supply yourself with food and water without the use of money. It's the advice that I offer you now. Okay? How would you feed yourself if you could not use money to do so? And even independent of the times in which we live, it's a good contingency to consider. But particularly now, as these events are unfolding, as the cave is crumbling, and as those who are growing more and more desperate and largely controlling the institutions that have been completely infiltrated turn to more and more extreme measures. Consider the food supply and the financial system both targets, and consider them both being targeted simultaneously. And this is the advice that I offer you. And beyond that, I say remain hopeful. We are moving through this thing. We have a few more years to go. But the most challenging period has yet to arrive. And those of you that have been working for many, many years on recognizing and transcending the cave within, you're very well positioned to move through this. There's an incredible amount of spiritual intention pouring onto this planet to be supportive of your success. So just keep going. In love and light, everyone. We'll speak again real soon.